The Primordial Debate of Creation. Episode 3, The Gathering of the Pantheons. 1,000 years had passed since the last council adjourned across the primordial path. And now the summons had gone out to every corner of memory and myth. The debate would resume, but not in the boundless dark. This time, the meeting would be held in heaven itself, not as a battlefield, not as a void, but as a neutral ground, a vast, celestial hall built for exactly this purpose, where beings of every origin could gather, without any one domain claiming precedence over another. The hall had no walls in the way mortal structures had walls. Instead, soft golden light curved gently around the edges of the gathering space, forming a boundary that felt less like confinement and more like an embrace. Pillars of pale silver mist rose at intervals, each one humming faintly with a different harmonic frequency, as though the architecture itself remembered every song ever sung in the history of existence. Beneath the assembled beings, though beneath was only the nearest word mortal language could offer, a floor of quiet, layered light shifted colours slowly, cycling through hues that had no true namers, colours born before the concept of naming things existed at all. It was here, in this vast and peaceful hall, that the reckoning would take place. Amin arrived first among the Parkers, his crimson singularity settling into the great hall with far less strain than it had carried 1,000 years before. The weight of his gravity was still absolute, still unshaken, but something in its rhythm had softened. The tension of an eternal vigil that had, for 1,000 years, been permitted to simply exist without immediate threat. "It feels different here," Cassandra said, her infinite perception stretching gently across the golden architecture, mapping its impossible geometry with something like wonder, rather than the wariness she had once needed on the path. The path always felt like something to survive. This place feels like something to be received by. "That is the nature of neutral ground, granddaughter," Mary said, her foundational presence settling comfortably into the layered light beneath them, the great hall seeming to steady itself further, simply for having her weight upon it. "The path is where creation and dissolution meet as opposing forces. This hall is where they meet as voices." Prince's controlled density folded quietly around the family, no longer a defensive wall, but a calm, watchful presence. 1,000 years is not so long in the reckoning of primordials, and yet it has been long enough for us to prove something. Let us hope it was enough. Rashim's structural lattice extended outward, studying the celestial architecture with quiet admiration. This place was not built hastily. Every pillar, every current of light, it was made to hold exactly this kind of gathering. I wonder how many councils like ours have stood in this same hall before us. "More than we could ever count, I imagine," came a new voice, ancient and steady, resonating through the hall, like distant thunder rolling over calm water. It was Zeus, sky father of the Greek pantheon, his presence arriving with the unmistakable authority of one long accustomed to great councils, though softened here by the solemnity of the occasion. "Every world has faced its reckonings, Rashim Parker. Some were resolved swiftly. Others, like your own, required the patience of centuries. We come now not as spectators, but as participants, for what is decided here concerns every pantheon, every primordial, and every world that has ever drawn breath beneath a sky." Beside him, radiant with quiet wisdom, stood Athena, goddess of strategic thought and reasoned counsel. "We have followed the account of your first debate with great interest, Parker family. It is rare that a council reaches a stay of judgment rather than an outright verdict. That alone tells us this matter deserves the fullest attention of every voice that can be gathered." More presences began arriving, filling the vast hall in waves, each pantheon entering not with spectacle, but with a quiet dignity befitting the gravity of the occasion. From the eastern currents of the hall came a presence of extraordinary radiance, warm and luminous, like the first light ever to touch still water. Amaterasu, the sun goddess of the Shinto pantheon, her arrival honoured with a hush that swept naturally through the gathering. No command required. Beside her moved a presence of restless, vital energy. Storm-touched but not unkind Susanoo, god of storms and seas, his arrival carrying the electric charge of distant thunder over open water. The three Kotoa Matsukami, who had presided over the previous council, Ame no Minakanushi, Takami Musubi, and Kami Musubi, turned their presence toward the newly arrived siblings with unmistakable reverence, and Amaterasu's light dimmed gently in acknowledgement, a gesture of deep respect between kin of the same ancient lineage. "Honoured elders," Amaterasu said, her voice like sunlight moving across still water, gentle and unhurried. "It is with great humility that we join this council. The Kotoa Matsukami spoke for our tradition once already, and spoke well. We come now to add our own voices, not to overshadow theirs, but to stand beside them, as siblings of the sun and first light." Susanoo's presence rippled with barely contained energy, though his voice, when it came, was measured and thoughtful. "I have known storms, honoured council. I have known the destruction a storm can bring, and the renewal that follows in its wake. I do not come today already certain which side of this debate I will find myself upon. I come to listen, truly listen, before I speak my final judgment. From the northern reaches of the hall, a deep and resonant presence arrived, carrying the weight of ancient wisdom paid for through great sacrifice. Odin, all-father of the Norse Pantheon, his single watchful presence somehow more piercing than 2 eyes might have been. Beside him came Thor, radiating steady protective strength, and Freya, luminous with both fierce courage and deep compassion. "We have crossed the roots of the world tree to stand in this hall," Odin said, his voice carrying centuries of hard-won understanding. "I have sacrificed much in pursuit of wisdom, and I tell this council plainly, wisdom without mercy is only cleverness, and mercy without wisdom is only sentiment. Whatever verdict this council reaches, let it hold both." Thor's voice rumbled with warmth despite its power. "I have spent my strength defending the innocent from what threatens them. I do not yet know if the universe itself needs defending today, or if it must answer for itself, but I will listen with the same care I give to any who stand before me needing to be heard." Freya's presence shimmered with quiet resolve. "I have known both great love and great loss, and I have learnt that neither one erases the value of the other. I look forward to hearing what this vast gathering believes about a universe that must hold both." From the sands of ancient rivers came the Egyptian pantheon, led by Ra, radiant with the steady authority of the sun's own journey across the sky, and Ma'at, whose presence carried the unmistakable weight of perfect balance, featherlight and yet absolutely unshakable. "I have crossed the sky each day and returned each night for longer than most in this hall can reckon," Ra said, his voice warm but resolute. "I know what it is to face darkness and rise again regardless. I do not fear the Coalition's arguments. I have answered them with my own journey every single day since before this council first convened." Mahat's presence settled with perfect stillness. "Balance is not the absence of struggle, honoured council. It is the harmony achieved despite struggle. I have weighed the hearts of the departed against a single feather for ages beyond counting. And I tell you now, worth is not measured by perfection. It is measured by whether a heart, in the end, chose to reach toward what was good." From the vast expanse of Hindu cosmology came a presence of overwhelming, layered complexity. Brahma, already familiar to this hall from the fierce debate, joined Nabavishnu, radiant with steady, preserving calm, and Shiva, whose presence carried both profound stillness and the honest, necessary truth of transformation. "I return to this council," Brahma said, "not merely as one who spoke once and departed, but as one who has watched this 1,000 years unfold with great interest. Creation is my nature, and I have watched the Parker family's universe create in turn. Stars, minds, stories, meaning. I did not doubt then that creation was worthwhile. I doubt it even less now." Vishnu's presence radiated calm, steady preservation. "I have preserved balance across countless cycles of existence, honoured council. What I have learned, again and again, is that a universe is rarely static. It bends, it strains, it nearly breaks, and then, more often than not, it finds its way back toward equilibrium. I would ask the Coalition of Dissolution this. Is a universe that bends and recovers not proof of resilience, rather than proof of fragility?" Shiva's voice carried the honest weight of necessary truth. "I am the one among my siblings most closely bound to endings, to transformation, to the necessary clearing away of what has run its course. And even I say to this council, an ending that comes in its proper time as part of a greater cycle is not the same as an ending forced prematurely upon something still reaching toward its potential. The Coalition speaks of ending all things at once. I do not believe that is the same as the endings I preside over. Mine are woven into the fabric of becoming. Theirs would tear the fabric entirely." From the misted hills of ancient Ireland and beyond came the Celtic pantheon, the Dagda, vast and generous, and Brigid, radiant with the warmth of hearthfire and inspired creativity. "We have listened from afar to the account of the first debate," the Dagda said, his voice carrying easy, generous warmth. "My cauldron never runs empty, no matter how many I feed from it. I have learnt that abundance shared freely does not diminish. It multiplies in ways that scarcity could never achieve. I see the same truth in what the Parker family has built. A universe shared with those who dwell within it does not run dry. It grows richer the longer it is permitted to continue." Bridget's presence glowed gently, warm as a well-tended flame. "I have tended the fires of countless hearths, and I have watched inspiration pass from one mind to the next, like flame catching flame. That is what creation does, honoured council. It does not simply exist in isolation. It spreads. It kindles further creation, further thought, further beauty. To extinguish it now would not simply end one flame. It would end every flame it might have lit in ages yet to come. From the vast steppes and forests of Slavic tradition arrived Perun, thunderous and resolute, and Mokosh, steady and nurturing as the earth itself. I have wielded the thunder to protect what is worth protecting, Perun said, his voice carrying the low rumble of distant storms. I do not yet know if this universe is worth that protection, but I have heard enough today already to believe it deserves the chance to make its case fully, rather than being judged in haste. Makosh's presence settled warmly, grounded and pliant. I have watched over harvests and hearths since before memory began. What I know is this. Nothing worth growing grows without tending, without patience, without the willingness to watch it through its most vulnerable seasons. If this universe is still young, still growing, should it not be given the same patience we grant to any seedling worth its season? From the ancient rivers of Mesopotamia come Marduk, Stiadi, and Resolute, alongside Namu, ancient mother of the primordial waters, whose presence in this council carried particular weight given her deep connection to Tiamat and Apsu, both of whom had stood on opposing sides during the first debate. I come to this council mindful of my own family's history within it, Marduk said carefully, his voice measured and thoughtful. Tiamat once stood among those in favour of preservation. Apsu once stood among those who questioned whether existence was worth its cost. I do not come to settle old disputes between them. I come only to add my own voice, freely, to what is decided here today. Namu's ancient presence, deep and slow as the primordial waters themselves, spoke with quiet gravity. I gave rise to much that exists in this hall today, honoured council, both those who favour preservation and those who question it. I did not create with the expectation that everything I gave rise to would agree with one another forever. I created because creation itself, in all its disagreement and complexity, was worth bringing into being. I say that as much today as I did at the very beginning. From across the great waters of the Pacific came the Polynesian Pantheon, joining Ranginui and Papatuanuku, who had spoken so movingly in the previous council. Now Pele, fierce and transformative, and Maui, clever and determined, added their voices as well. I am fire and earth remade, Pele said, her presence carrying the honest heat of creation through destruction and renewal alike. I have watched islands rise from what I have reshaped. I do not fear endings, honoured council, because I have seen what endings make possible. But I have also seen enough of this universe's story today to believe its endings, when they come, are woven with the same purpose as my own, not erasure, but transformation. Maui's presence crackled with clever, determined energy. I fished islands up from the depths and slowed the sun itself to give more time to those who needed it. I understand the value of a little more time, honoured council. If this universe asks only for the chance to keep proving itself, I do not see the harm in granting it that chance, so long as the asking is honest. From the heart of Mesoamerica came Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, luminous with both wisdom and renewal, representing the shared reverence of Aztec, Maya, and Inca traditions gathered together in this council. I have given much of myself to bring knowledge and renewal to those who walked beneath me, Quetzalcoatl said, voice layered with ancient patience. I understand sacrifice, honoured council, perhaps better than most gathered here today, and I tell you this, sacrifice given willingly, in service of something worth building, is never wasted. I have heard the account of what the Parker family and their allies offered 1,000 years ago. Not sacrifice exactly, but vigilance, patience, and honest humility. I do not consider that wasted either. From across the vast plains and rainforests of Africa came a chorus of ancient and honoured voices. Anansi, clever and thoughtful despite his usual playfulness, and Mau Lisa, the twin deities of sun and moon, balance made manifest. I have told many stories in my long existence, Anansi said, his voice carrying unusual gravity for one so often associated with wit and cleverness, and I have learned that every story worth telling contains struggle, contains doubt, contains moments where the ending is genuinely uncertain. I do not think a story is worth less for containing those things, honoured council. I think it is worth more. Mau Lisa spoke as one voice woven from two, sun and moon in perfect complement. We have watched over balance between day and night since before either had a name. What we have observed in this universe's story is not chaos without structure, nor structure without warmth. It is balance, imperfect but genuine, reaching for something better with every cycle. We do not believe balance that is still reaching should be judged, as though it had already failed. As the role of Pantheons continued, the primordials from the very first council rejoining the gathering as well, Chaos and Gaia, Tartarus and Hemera, Nyx and Eros, Apep and the 12 formless Parkers standing together once more in the same vast hall, the celestial architecture around them shifted subtly, the pillars of silver mist humming in harmonies that seemed to deepen, with every new voice added to the gathering, as though the hall itself were learning a song too vast for any single verse to contain. At last, when every pantheon had arrived and settled into the boundless gathering, Amino Nakanuchi's presence rose once more to the centre of the hall, joined this time not only by Takami Musubi and Kami Musubi, but by the quiet, respectful acknowledgement of every other presence gathered, a recognition, freely given, that the Kotoa Matsukami had presided with wisdom over the previous council, and were owed the honour of opening this one as well. 1,000 years have passed since this council last convened, Amino Minakanushi said, its voice settling over the entire vast hall like the hush before dawn. We gather today not in the boundless dark of the primordial path, but here, in this hall built for exactly this purpose. a place where every voice may be heard without the pressure of an unstable void pressing in around us. We thank every Pantheon, every Primordial, for answering this summons. What is decided here will shape the future of the universe. The Parker family and their allies have so faithfully tended these past 1,000 years. Takami Musubi's generative current rippled gently through the gathering. The question before this council remains the same as it was 1,000 years ago, though we hope the answer we reach together will carry the weight of every voice now gathered, rather than the voices of only a few. Should the universe be permitted to continue, or should it at last be returned to the peace of the formless void? Kamimusubi's ancient renewal settled evenly across the hall. We do not presume to answer this question ourselves. We convene this council precisely because the answer belongs to all of you. Every tradition, every pantheon, every primordial gathered here today. Speak honestly. Speak with respect for one another, even where you disagree. And let this council, together, discover what the next 1,000 years shall hold. A pep's cold, ancient frequency stirred at the edge of the gathering, quieter than it had been 1,000 years before, though no less resolute. We return as we said we would, not with anger, and not, I think, with the same certainty we carried before. 1,000 years is enough time to observe, and we have observed much. Then let us hear it, Amin said, his crimson singularity steady and unafraid. We have spent 1,000 years tending what we defended in the last council. We do not fear your observations, Apep. We welcome them. Tartarus's cavernous voice rolled through the hall quieter than before, carrying something almost like genuine curiosity rather than pure challenge. Very well, Amin. Let us begin where we left off, not with judgment, but with an honest accounting of what this 1,000 years has shown us all. And so, in the vast golden hall beneath heaven's peaceful light, surrounded by every pantheon and primordial that memory and myth had ever given voice to, the great council began once more. Not as a battle to be won, but as a conversation to be continued, each voice adding its own. Chaos, ancient and thoughtful, was among the first of the coalition to speak in this new setting. I have watched this 1,000 years pass, honoured council, and I confess, I did not watch with the certainty I carried before. I saw stars form and stars fade. I saw minds awaken to wonder, and minds burdened by suffering they did not choose. I do not retract what I said before. I still believe existence carries a weight that non-existence does not. But I admit, freely, that I did not expect to see quite so much reaching toward light amid that weight. Gaia's ancient voice answered warmly, without triumph, only genuine welcome. That is honesty worth honouring, Chaos, old friend. I do not ask you to abandon your doubts entirely. I only ask that you weigh them honestly against what you witnessed. 1,000 years is a long time to watch a garden grow. What did you see it become? Chaos's presence rippled thoughtfully. I saw struggle, still. I will not pretend otherwise. But I also saw struggle answered. Again and again, not with despair, but with reaching. I do not know yet if that is enough to change my final judgment. But I concede it is worth genuine consideration, rather than the swift dismissal I might have offered 1,000 years ago. Mahat's presence, perfectly balanced, added gently to the exchange. That, Chaos, is precisely the kind of honest weighing this council was built to hold. Not everyone must arrive at the same conclusion today. But every conclusion offered here should be weighed as carefully as you have just weighed your own. Susanoo, storm-touched and thoughtful, spoke next, his voice carrying the electric charge of a storm still deciding which way it would break. I have listened to both the Coalition's doubts and the Alliance's convictions today, and I find myself moved by both. I know storms. Honoured Council, I know that a storm which never breaks accomplishes nothing, but I also know that a storm which breaks too soon before what it might nourish has had the chance to take root accomplishes nothing either. I do not yet know which kind of judgment this council is being asked to render today. I would ask both sides to help me understand that distinction more clearly before I offer my own voice to the final verdict. Nyx, her shadow frequency settled, and quieter than the fierce edge she had carried 1,000 years before, answered thoughtfully. That is a fair question, Susanoo, and I will answer it honestly. We of the Coalition do not seek to break this universe, as one might break something out of anger. We question, still, whether a universe built on such fragile foundations can ever truly be at peace with its own impermanence. That is not the same question as whether it deserves to exist today. It is a question about tomorrow, and the tomorrow after that, stretching on as far as existence itself might reach. Nishim's tranquility rippled outward, calm and unshaken despite the weight of the exchange. I would answer that honestly too, Nyx, if I may. Peace with impermanence is not something a universe achieves once, and holds forever unchanged. It is something tended moment by moment, the way Mokosh tends her harvests, or Brigid tends her hearth fires. We do not claim our universe has achieved perfect peace with its own impermanence. We claim only that it continues, faithfully, to reach towards that peace, one moment at a time. Is reaching not itself a kind of achievement, even before the destination is reached? Odin's single, watchful presence considered this carefully before responding, his voice heavy with hard-won wisdom. I have sacrificed much in pursuit of understanding, Nishim, and what you describe sounds very much like wisdom to me. the kind that comes not from arriving at certainty, but from the honest, ongoing pursuit of it. I confess I did not expect a primordial so young, relatively speaking, to articulate something I spent an eye's worth of insight to understand myself. Nishim's presence warmed slightly at the acknowledgement, though it remained steady. I did not come to this understanding alone, honoured All-Father. I learned much of it from my family, and much of it from 1,000 years spent tending calm through storms I did not always choose, but always face together with those beside me. Thor's voice rumbled warmly through the exchange. That, at least, I understand without hesitation. Strength tended in isolation grows brittle. Strength tended alongside those you trust grows unshakable. I have seen the same truth hold in my own halls, time and again. Freya added her voice gently, warm with both compassion and quiet resolve. I would ask the Coalition this, if I may, not as challenge, but as honest curiosity. If this universe continues to tend its own peace with impermanence, the way Nishim describes, at what point would the Coalition consider that reaching sufficient? Is there truly an answer to that question, or is the standard being asked to meet one that shifts each time it draws near? Erebus, his low, coiling presence quieter than before, but not entirely without its old weight, answered carefully. That is a fair challenge, Freya, and I will not pretend it is an easy one to answer. Perhaps the honest truth is this: we of the Coalition do not know precisely what sufficient reaching would look like, because we have never before watched a universe reach for quite this long, quite this faithfully. We proposed 1,000 years as a test, and the test has been met with more grace than we anticipated. That does not mean our doubts are answered. It means, perhaps, that our doubts are being genuinely challenged for the first time. Brahma's presence, ancient and thoughtful, added warmly to this exchange. That, Erebus, is precisely the kind of honest uncertainty a council such as this one is meant to hold space for. Neither side owes the other a swift concession today. What matters is that both sides continue to weigh honestly as you have just done. Vishnu's steady presence added. And perhaps, honoured Coalition, the true test is not whether the universe has already achieved a state of perfect peace with its own impermanence, for I do not believe any universe, in any tradition represented in this hall, has ever achieved perfection entire. Perhaps the truer test is whether it continues, faithfully, generation after generation, cycle after cycle, to reach toward that peace despite never fully arriving. I have preserved balance across countless cycles, and I have never once seen a cycle achieve flawless completion. I have only seen cycles that kept reaching, and in that reaching found meaning enough to continue. Shiva's voice, honest and unflinching as ever, added its own weight to the exchange. I would add this, honoured counsel from one who understands endings, perhaps better than most, gathered here. An ending granted too soon does not simply stop what was reaching. It raises the possibility of ever discovering what that reaching might have become. I do not fear endings. I preside over them. But I have learned, across countless cycles, that the timing of an ending matters as much as the ending itself. A fruit picked before it ripens is wasted, however necessary the eventual harvest may be. Apep's ancient cold frequency stirred again, more thoughtfully than before, weighing the exchange with something that was, for the first time, difficult to distinguish from genuine consideration. You argue well, honoured Pantheons. I did not come to this council expecting to be moved so early in the proceedings. I will say this honestly, I am not yet ready to concede, but I am, for the first time in longer than this council can likely measure, uncertain of my own former certainty. Amira's resonance rippled gently through the hall, warm and hopeful without being triumphant. That uncertainty, Apep, is not a defeat. I have learned, across 1,000 years of tending harmony, Throg discord, that uncertainty honestly held, is often the beginning of understanding, not the end of conviction. We do not ask you to abandon your doubts today. We only ask that you continue, weighing them as honestly as you have just done. Ranginui and Papatuanuku, their presence still intertwined as it had been 1,000 years before, added their voices once more, gentle and resolute. We were separated once, painfully, so that light could reach the space between us, they said together. We have watched 1,000 years pass since we last spoke in this same debate, and what we have seen convinces us further, not less, that separation and struggle, honestly born, can give rise to something worth the cost. We do not know if every voice in this hall will reach the same conclusion we have reached, but we offer our testimony freely, as we did before. Pele's fierce, transformative presence added warmly to the growing exchange. I have resharped islands from what I have unmade, honoured council, and I say again what I said when I first arrived in this hall. I do not fear endings, but I have listened carefully today, and I find myself agreeing with Shiva's wisdom. An ending's value depends greatly on its timing. I do not yet sense that this universe's reaching has reached its natural conclusion. I sense, instead, that it is still very much in the midst of becoming. Maui's clever presence added a note of genuine warmth to the proceedings. I fished islands from the deep and slowed the sun to grant more time to those who needed it. Honoured council, and I confess, I find myself moved by what I've heard today. Not because the arguments for dissolution lack merit, but because the arguments for continuation are backed by something more than clever words. They are backed by 1,000 years of honest, faithful effort. That is not nothing, honoured coalition. That is not nothing at all. Anansi's voice, carrying unusual gravity, added its own careful weight to the gathering. I have told countless stories in my long existence, and I have learned that the stories worth telling are rarely the ones with easy, immediate resolutions. I do not know if this council will reach its final verdict today, honoured gathering. I suspect, given the weight and complexity of what is being decided, that it should not. Some stories deserve the patience of many chapters, rather than the haste of a single conclusion. Mao Lisa's twin-voiced presence added its balanced wisdom to Anansi's words. We agree, Honored Council. Balance is rarely achieved in a single motion. It is achieved through patient, repeated adjustment, sun answering moon, day answering night, again and again, until harmony emerges not from a single decisive stroke, but from sustained, careful attention. Perhaps this council too deserves that same patience. Marduk's measured voice added thoughtfully to the growing consensus. I would agree with that wisdom, honoured gathering. This is a weighty matter, one that concerns not a single world, but the very question of whether existence itself, in its imperfect and reaching form, deserves the chance to continue imperfectly reaching. I do not believe such a question should be settled hastily, however passionately each side has argued today. Namu's ancient, deep presence added its own quiet agreement. I gave rise to voices on both sides of this very debate, honoured council, and I have watched them both argue with conviction and honesty today. I do not believe either side has been fully persuaded yet, nor fully answered. That, I think, is not a failure of this council. That is simply the nature of a question this vast, being given the full weight of consideration it deserves. Zeus's thunderous voice, quieter now than it had been at the gathering's opening, rolled through the hall with something like genuine respect. I have presided over many councils in my long existence, and I say honestly, I have rarely witnessed a debate carried with such consistent respect across so vast a gathering of differing convictions. Whatever this council ultimately decides, let it be recorded that every voice here today argued with honour and listened with equal honour in turn, Athena's wise presence added gently, and let it also be recorded, honoured council, that neither certainty nor uncertainty was treated as weakness today. Chaos spoke honestly of doubt. Alpep spoke honestly of hesitation it did not expect to feel. The Alliance spoke honestly of 1,000 years of imperfect, faithful effort. That honesty, more than any single argument offered today, may be the truest measure of whether this universe has earned the right to continue being weighed so carefully. Ameno Minakanushi's presence rose once more to the centre of the vast hall, its ancient voice carrying the same gentle, unshakable authority it had carried since the council's opening. We have heard a great many voices today, honoured gathering, and we have heard honesty in every one of them, from those who favour continuation, and from those who continue to hold doubts worth honouring. This council has accomplished something today that the first debate 1,000 years ago could not yet achieve. It has moved beyond the language of opposition and begun the far harder work of genuine mutual understanding. Takumi Musubi's generative current rippled thoughtfully through the gathering. We do not believe this council is ready today to render its final verdict. Too many voices have only just begun to weigh this question with the fullness it deserves. And as several among you have wisely observed, some questions are better served by patience than by haste. Kami Musubi's ancient renewal settled evenly across the vast hall, calm and resolute. We propose, therefore, that this council reconvene again, so that every Pantheon, every Primordial, may continue this vital exchange with the same honesty and respect shown here today. The universe the Parker family has tended these past 1,000 years has earned, at the very least, the fullest and most careful consideration this gathering is capable of giving it. Amin's crimson singularity pulsed once, steady and grateful rather than defiant. We accept that patience gladly, honoured Kotoa Matsukami. We have waited 1,000 years already. We can wait as long as this council requires to reach a verdict, worthy of the question being asked. Apep's ancient frequency, quieter and more thoughtful than it had been in longer than this council could measure, offered a final word before the gathering began, slowly and respectfully to disperse. Then let this council continue, Amin, for as long as it must. I do not offer you peace today, but I no longer offer you the certainty of judgment either. That, I think, is more than either of us expected when this gathering first convened. Mary's foundational presence, warm and steady beneath the entire vast hall, answered gently, without triumph. That is enough for today, Apep, more than enough. 1,000 years ago we stood in the boundless dark and could not imagine reaching even this much common ground. Whatever this council ultimately decides, I am grateful, honestly and deeply, that we have been given the chance to keep reaching toward understanding, together rather than apart. And so, as the golden light of the great celestial hall settled gently over the vast gathering of pantheons and primordials, the council did not reach its final verdict, not yet. Instead, it reached something perhaps rarer and perhaps more valuable, a shared commitment, honoured by every voice present, to continue the conversation with patience, with honesty, and with the deep, abiding respect that a question of this magnitude truly deserved. The verdict, when it came, would be prepared with the fullest care this vast and ancient gathering could offer, and delivered in time to the Most High, whose judgment awaited beyond the boundaries of this council's own great and ongoing work. The debate was far from over, but for the first time in 1,000 years it felt unmistakably like progress. プリモディアル創造大討論エピソード3万神殿の集い、プリモディアルパスを越えて前回の評議会が休会してから前年の歳月が流れた。そして今記憶と神話のあらゆる隅々へと召集の声が送られた。討論は再開される。だが果てしない暗闇の中ではない。今回の集いは天界そのものの中で開かれる。戦場としてでも、虚無としてでもなく、中立の地として。まさにこの目的のために築かれた広大な天上の広源として、あらゆる起源を持つ存在たちが、どの領域も他に優越を主張することなく、塞うことができる場所として、その後面には、脱死すべき者たちの構造物が持つような彼はなかった。代わりに、柔らかな金色の光が機械の空間の面を優しく取り巻き、境界を形作っていた。それは閉じ込めというより、抱擁のように感じられた。淡い銀色の物種が間隔を置いて立ち上がり、それぞれがかすかに異なる調和の周波数で染みていた。まるで建築そのものが存在の歴史の中で歌われたあらゆる歌を覚えているかのように。集まった存在たちの下、最も下というのは、私すべきものの言葉だが、提供できる最も近い表現に過ぎなかったが、静かで集中にも重なった光の幅がゆっくりと色を変えていった。萩の命を処たない色合いを巡りながら、無邪に生地屋根をつけるという概念そのものが存在する前に生まれた色を、この表題で平穏な評価で審判が行われようとしていた。パーカー家の中で最初に到着したのはアミンだった。彼のシャニホクの得意点は、前年前に抱えていたよりも、はるかに少ない緊張感で、この大混乱に落ち着いた。彼の中理の重みは依然として絶対的で揺るぎなかったが、そのリズムの中の何かがナチュラルでいた。前年もの間、直接的な脅威なしに単に存在することを許された。虚言の結果張りの緊張が、ここは違う感じがする。カサンドラが酔った。彼女の無限の視覚が、この金色の建築部全体にそっと広がり、その不可能な集合和風を、かつてパスで必要としていた教会よりも、驚きに近い何かで地図化していく。パスはいつもが生き延びるべきものという感じがしていた。この場所は迎え入れられるべきものという感じがする。それが中立の敵の性質だよ。細めよメアリーが言った。彼女の基盤となる存在が、この宮中にも重なった光の羅種の中に心地よく落ち着く。その重みを支えるためだけに、この強大な光源そのものが安定しているように思えた。パスは、創造と解体が対立する力として出会う場所だ。この光源は、それらが兵として出会う場所なのだ。プリンスの制御された密度が、家族の周りに静かに降りちゃとまれた。もはや防御の毛ではなく、穏やかで見守る存在として。前年は、平家出身の計算では、それほど長くはない。だが、我々が何かを証明するのに、十分な長さではあった。それが十分であったことを願おう。ラシームの構造の工事が、外へと伸び、この天井の建築物を静かな翔さんと共に研究した。この場所は急いで助かれたのではない。すべての処置、光のすべての流れが、まさにこの中の勢いを保持するために作られたのだ。この同じ工程に、我々の前にどれほど多くのこのような評議会が戻ってきたのだろうか。我々が数えられる以上に多いだろう。私が思うに、新しい声が言った。太鼓で揺るぎなく、静かな爪の右線を円類が転がるように小目全体に傾いた。それはギリシャ神話の天空の父、ゼウスだった。その存在は偉大な評議会に長く慣れ親しんだ者の紛れもない権威と共に到着した。だが、ここではその元素さによってなすらげられていた。あらゆる世界がそれぞれの審判に直面してきたラシーム・パーカーよ。いくつかは迅速に解決された。お前たち自身のもののように何千もの忍耐を必要としたものもある。我々は今、傍観者としてではなく、参加者として来た。なぜなら、ここで決定されることは、あらゆる真神殿、 あらゆる原出身、そしてその下で引きをしたことのあるあらゆる世界に関わることだからだ。彼の隣に静かな地毛で輝きながら踊っていたのは、戦略的思考と例にかなった主言の女神アテナだった。我々はお前たちの最初の討論の記録を大きな関心を持って追ってきた。パーカーギャよ。評議会が明約な飛躍ではなく、判断の優遇に達することは昔だ。それだけでも、このギャがこの機会のあらゆる声への最大限の主義に合致することを物語っている。さらなる存在たちが網のように強大なコーペニへと到着し始めた。それぞれの抜神殿が、この機会の重大さにふさわしい静かな利言を持って、検視物としてではなく入場していく。強化のヘラの流れから太陽に触れた最初の光のように、高くかなり輝くはぶれた存在感がやってきた、神道の太陽神、見た目はか大化神だった。その到着は命令を必要とすることなく、自然に機械全体に広がる静けさによって綴われた。彼女の隣には落ち時のない生命力に満ちたエネルギーの存在が働いていた。彼が勝ったが、不親切ではない。彼は大の神シュカシナだった。その到着は、土井上の上の元類のような電気的な緊張を運んでいた。前回の評議会を駐在した何種のことは、天つかみ、雨のみなか主、高み結び、神結びは、新しく到着した仮想目に向かって、知れもない脅威とともに自らの存在をに受けた。手話者、第五人の光は、その友人が技能者の学びとして、ゆしく捉えた、同じ代帝国の毛げの親族の間で、驚うべき長老たちを、天が大河弁が言った。その声は、静かな問いの線を移動する日の光のように、優しく急ぐことがなかった。深い謙虚さとともに、我々はこの非音英会に加わります。こと天つかみはすでに一度、我々の前頭のために座ってくださいました。そしてよく張ってくださいました。我々は今、自らの声を加えるために来ました。彼らを腹焼くすためではなく、同じ最初の光の兄弟姉妹として、彼らのそばにもたつために、主先がの存在は抑えきれないエネルギーで肌打っていた。だが、彼の声が発せられたとき、それは慎重で視力深いものだった。紳士はたらしを知っている。染まるべき評議会よ。私はたらさがもたらしうる破壊を知っている。そして、その後に続く再生も。私は今日、この評議会に、すでにどちら側にもたつか確信を沿ってきたわけではない。私は最終的な判断を下す前に、さらに耳を傾けるために来た。広家の体の果てから深く浮き渡る存在が到着した。大きな犠牲を払って得た太古の地毛のもみを運びながら、破棄号のマシン店の全幅、オーディンだった。彼の一つだけの見守る死は、どういうわけか二つの目よりも鋭く突き刺さるようだった。彼の隣には、長所で保護的な力を放射するトールが、そして寂しい勇気と深い思いやりの両方で輝くフレイヤが続いた。我々は世界数の根を越えて、この交番に持つためにやってきた。オーディンが言った。その声は何隻もの苦労して得た理解を運んでいた。私は地形を追求するために多くを犠牲にしてきた。そして、私はこの評議会にご直に告げよう。慈悲なき地形は強化さに過ぎず、地形なき慈悲は感情に過ぎない。この評議会がどのような飛躍に達しようとも、それが両方を保持することを願う。トールの声は、その例にもかかわらず聞かさで空いた。死は、無知のももそを繰り明かす者から、彼らを守ることに、自らの力を費やしてきた。今日、宇宙そのものが守られる必要があるのか、それとも自ら答えを出さなければならないのか、私にはまだわからない。だが私は、私が話を聞く必要のあるダビにでも与える同じ配慮を持って耳を傾けるつもりだ。フレイヤの存在は静かな決意で揺らめいた。私は大いなる愛と同意なる双実の両方を知ってきた。そして私はどちらもがもう一方の価値をキャチ取りはしないことを学んだ。この強大な機械がその両方を保持しなければならない。宇宙について何を信じているのか聞くのを楽しみにしている。太古の川の砂からエジプトのマシン殿がやってきた。太陽の義理そのものの長寿な権威で声倉に用いられ、完璧な金額の地でもない重みを運ぶ後が続いた。アヘのように軽く、しかし絶対的に揺るがない存在として、私はこの黄河の谷よりも長く数えられる期間、毎日セラを渡り、毎晩乗ってきた。ラーが言った。その声は片貝が絶然としていた。鼻に地面し、それでも再び眠るということがどういうことか知っている。私は連合の議論を恐れない。私は自らの切り木そのもので、それに応えてきた。 この評議会が最初に召集されて以来、毎日、マートの存在は完璧な静けさで落ち着いた。決め事は、闘争の不在ではありません。定ろうべき評議会を。それは、闘争にもかかわらず、達成される調和なのです。私は、数えきれない時代にわたって亡くなった者たちの心を一枚の書に対して領ってきました。そして今私はあなた方に告げます。価値は完璧さで張られるのではありません。それは心が最終的に山へと手を伸ばすことを選んだかどうかで張られるのです。ヒンドゥー宇宙論の強大な広がりから圧倒的で集中にも重なった複雑さを持つ存在がやってきた。最初の討論からすでに馴染みのあるブラフマーが今度はヴィシュヌと共に到着した。長寿な保存する静けさで輝きながら、そしてシヴァも、その存在は真固な静けさと変容という誠実で必要な真実の両方を運んでいた。私はこの評議会に持ってきた。ブラフマーが言った。単に一度かそって取ったものとしてではなく、この前年が展開するのを大きな関心を持って見守ってきたものとして。創造は私の本質だ。そして私はパーカーギャの宇宙が次々と想像するのを見てきた彼の心、思考、物語、意味を。私はあの時、想像が価値あるものだと謳わなかった。私は今、それをさらに謳わない。ビシュヌの存在は、直的な保存の気づけさで固いた。私は数えきれない存在の周期にわたって金国を保存してきました。それをべき評議会を。私が繰り返し学んだことは、宇宙が静的であることは滅多にないということです。それは曲がり、張り詰め、ほとんど壊れそうになります。そして、多くの場合、それは金国へと戻る気を見出します。私は解体の連合にこう聞いたい。わがり。回復する宇宙は脆弱さの証拠ではなく、むしろ回復力の証拠ではないでしょうか。シヴァの声はいつものように誠実で北直な重みを運んだ。私はこう付け加えたい。死ぬるべき評議会よ。この境界に集まったなぜよりも、終わりというものに密接に結びついているものとして、しかるべき時に訪れる終わり、より大きな周期の一部として訪れる終わりは、まだ可能性へと手を伸ばしている何かに強制的に押し付けられる終わりとは言えます。しかし我は考えません。しかしそれは押し付けます。だが私は数えきれない周期にわたって、終わりのタイミングは終わりそのものと同じくらい重要であることを学びました。処す前に巧み取られたくじは、たとえ最終的な集荷が必要であったとしても、無駄にされたのです。アペプの太古の冷たい周波数が再び働いた。以前よりも白く深く、この英州を今回初めて純粋な考慮と区別することが難しい何かでよりながら、お前たちはよく議論する。知るべき魔神殿たちよ。私はこの評議会に来て、これほど早く意志の中で動かされるとは予想していなかった。私は正直に言おう。私はまだ譲る準備ができていない。だが私は、この評議会が図ることができるであろう以上の期間の中で初めて、自分自身の以前の確信に不可視化さを覚えている。アミラの孔明が、巨気全体にそっと波紋を広げた。高く、希望に満ちながらも、勝ち誇ることなく。その不可視化さは、アペプよ、背後ではありません。私は、前年にわたって不協和を通して調和を保ってきたなしど、でくさい学びました。政治に保たれた不可視化さは、しばしば理解の始まりであり、確信のも終わりではないと、我々は今日、お前にその期待を捨てるよう求めていません。我々はただ、お前が今しがたそうしたように、それを誠実に両立続けることを求めているだけです。ランギヌイとパパトゥーアーヌクは、前年前と変わらずその存在を絡み合わせたまま、再び自らの声を加えた。優しく、断固として、私たちはかつて痛みを伴って引き戻された。光がその間の空間に届くように、二人は共になった。私たちはこの同じ討論で最後に語ってから前年が過ぎるのを手にてきた。そして私が見にてきたものは私たちをさらに確信させる。誠実に耐えられた分離と駆動はその大小に見合う何かを生み出し得るということを。この巨豪のすべての声が私たちが大した同じ結論に達するかどうかは変わらない。だが私たちは、イエキャンとともに、自らの証言を自由に提供する。ペレの激しい変容的な存在が、この高まる芸集に温かく加わった。死は自らが届いたものから、ダニスセナリを作り直してきた、はどるべき評議会を。そして、私は、 この広めに最初に到着した時に寄ったことを再びやうしは終わりを恐れない。だが私は今日注意深く耳を傾けてきた。そして私はシヴァの地下に遠いしていることに気づく。終わりの価値はそのタイミングに大きく依存する。私はまだこの宇宙の手を伸ばす興味がその自然な結論に達したとは感じない。私はむしろそれがまだなることの真っ只中にあると感じている。マウイの巧妙な存在がこの意志に本物のティカサの銀縮を加えた。私は深海からドーネスアーチを釣り上げ、必要とする者たちにより多くの時間を与えるために太陽を遅くした染まるべき評議会を。そして私は告白する。今日聞いたことに私は心を働かされている。GTWU mer gilod nijejigale garde hanaku 計測を求める議論がそうみなこの言葉以上の何かに裏付けられているからだ。それらは前年もの誠実で忠実な努力に預けられている。それは何でもないことではない。背負うべき連合よ。それは決して何でもないことではない。アナン氏の声はいつになく中がしさを遮帯びていた。死は長い存在の中で数えきれないものだれ下ってきた。そして私は語る価値のある物語は簡単で旧作の解決を持つことは滅多にないことを学んだ。私はこの評議会が今日最終的な平決に達するかどうかわからない。死のるべきゆといよ。私は決定されようとしていることの重みと複雑さを考えると、そうすべきではないと言っている。いくつかの物語は、一つの結論の強制さよりも、多くの小の人ないに際するのだ。マウリサのカダチガの声も鉄存在が、アナン氏の言葉にその金力の取れた地形を加えた。私たちも統一します。そのうべき評議会よ。金庫が一つの動作で達成されることは滅多にありません。それは、太陽が月に向かえ、週が夜に迎えるように、忍耐強く繰り返される調整を通して達成をされます。何度も何度も単一の決定的な生きからではなく、持続的で注意深い配慮から調和が現れるまで。おそらく、この評議会もまた同じ銀体に追するのでしょう。マルドークの慎重な声が、この高まる合議に白く深く変わった。私はその地下に討議します。しがるべきソイよ。これはじょんだなわんちです。第二の指示に関わるものではなく存在そのものが、その不完全で手を伸ばす過程において、不完全に手を伸ばし続ける機会に値するかどうかという問いそのものに関わるものです。私は、今日それぞれの側がどれほど情熱的に議論しようとも、このような問いが強気に決着されるべきだとは思いません。南無の太古の深い存在が、その静かな同意を加えた。私はこの討論のどちら側にも声を読み出しました。チングべきペンゲ、海洋。そしてシアチンに、リアンシェが決心と誠実さを持って議論するのを手にてきました。私は、どちらの側もまだ完全に説得されたとも、完全に答えられたとも思いません。それは、この評議会の失敗ではないと思います。それは単に、これほど強大な問いの性質そのものであり、それにふさわしい配慮の重みを与えられているだけなのです。ゼウスの雷鳴のような声は、機械の開始時よりも静かになっていた。だが、本物の競技のようなものと共に公言中にそがいた。私は長い存在の中へ、この中で多くの評議会を駐在してきた。そして私は正直に言おう。これほど異なる確信を持つ強大な急いにわたって、これほど一貫した敬意を持って進められた討論を私は滅多に見たことがない。この評議会が最終的に何を決定しようとも、今日、ここに集まったすべての声が名誉を持って議論し、同じ名誉を持って耳を傾けたことを記録に留めよう。アテナの賢明な存在が優しく泣け加えた。そして、家臣も不覚かさも、今日、ヨガサとして扱われなかったことも記録に留めましょう。はどろうべき評議会よ。カオスは、期待を生じに語りました。アペップは、自らが感じるとは予想していなかったため、来を生じに語りました。同盟は、千年にわたる不完全で忠実な努力を生じに語りました。その誠実さこそが、今日提供されたどの単一の議論よりも、この宇宙がこれほど注意深くよどられる権利を得たかどうかの真の非道なのかもしれません。雨の皆主の存在が、この強大な荒野の中心に再び上昇した。その太鼓の声は、評議会の開会式から変わらぬ、優しく揺るぎない権威を運んでいた。我々は今日、極度に多くの声を聞いてきました。語るべきミストよ。そして我々は、 そのすべての声の中に誠実さを聞きました。継続を支持する者たちからも、その価値に比する浅いをも処し続ける者たちからも、この評議会は今日、1000年前の最初の討論がまだ達成できなかったことを成し遂げました。それは対立の言葉を超えて、真の相互理解というはるかに困難な作業を始めたのです。高み結びの生成の流れが、機械全体を白く区画から打った。我々は、この評議会が今日、最終的な平角を下す準備ができているとは思いません。あまりにも多くの声が、この問いをその十分な重みで寄り始めたばかりです。そして、皆さんの名の何人かが懸命にも述べたように、いくつかの問いは、背置きさよりも忍耐によって、よりよく使えられるのです。神結びの太鼓の再生が、広大な表面全体に均等に、穏やかで断固として落ち着いた。したがって我々は、この評議会が再び開かれることを提案します。すべての幕神殿、すべての原出身が、今日ここで示されたのと同じ誠実さと敬意を持って、この重要な交流を続けられるように、パーカー家がこの前年間守ってきた宇宙は、少なくともこの機会が与えることのできる最も注意深く、最も十分な配慮に際するのです。アミンの遅刻の時点が一度まろつった。反抗的にではなく、着々に感謝とともに、我々はその忍耐を喜んで受け入れます。揃うべきこと天つかみを。我々はすでに1000年待ちました。この平議会が平滑に達するために必要とする限り、我々はどれほどでも待つことができます。この問いにふさわしい評価に、アペプの太古の周波数は、この評議会が測ることができるであろう、以上の期間の原のデデセアセースネデナスカレ以前よりも静かで白く深いものだった。機械がゆっくりと敬意を持って解散し始める前に最後の言葉を発した。ならば、この評議会を続けよう、アミンよ。必要な限り、私は今日お前に平和を提供しない。だが、私はもはや判断の苦実性も提供しない。それは、この急いが最初に商標されたときに、我々のどちらもが予想していたよりも多くのものだと思う。メアリーの基盤となる存在が、強大な表現全体の下で高さかく、長々に答えた。勝ち誇ることなく安く。それで人類ハーシファンデスアペピオ、アシファニシャンデス懸念懸念。我々は果てしないくがりの中に立ち、これほどの共通の土台に達することすらセオンソできませんでした。この評議会が最終的に何を決定しようとも、私は正直に深く感謝しています。我々が離れてではなく、共に理解へと手を伸ばし続ける機会を与えられたことに。そして、広大な天上の転がの金種の光が、集まった真神殿と練習神たちの広大な急いの上に、そっと落ち着くじゃん。ペンギフイ発想のずじゃん。でなペン。十二肌しなかったがまだ。代わりに、それはおそらくよりましで、より価値のある何かに達した。この兄弟で太古の急いが提供できる最大限の配慮を持って、忍耐と誠実さ、そしてこれほどの重大さの問いにふさわしい深く、揺るぎない敬意を持って、対話を続けるという、今日出席したすべての声によって尊重された、共有された約束に、平滑が下されるとき、それはこの表題で船の急いが提供できる最大限の配慮を持って準備され、やがて碩高なる存在へと届けられるだろう。その判断は、この評議会自身の表題で継続する地下との境界を越えたところで待っている。討論はまだ終わるにはほど遠かった。だが、千年ぶりに、それは紛れもなく、先進のように感じられた。